seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there, somewhere.
Welcome. It's so lovely to be back with you today. It's 8 p.m. in the evening in the United Kingdom. So as the program progresses, you'll see it go from lightness to darkness. I just want to thank you because it's a privilege to be with you. And, you know, we've got Dr. Stephen Pidgeon. He'll be entering the studio soon from Saviour Publishing, our resident feature guest. And as you know, myself, Jessica Knott, Wild Honey Ministries. In America, so many of you are joining in. It's your early afternoon, depending on what part you're from. And we've got people in Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and it's late for you, later than it is here in the UK. And really, I just want to say thank you, whether you're watching live, whether you're watching recorded. Some of you watch the repeat, so you can just get so much in. I want to thank you. You know, 4 weeks ago, this was a program, although it was never really a program to me. This has always been ministry, and you have always been a community. 4 weeks in, I know so many of your names. I know your story. I know your walk here. I know your aspirations that you want from this program to meet your needs. And that's what it's all about. It's about you. It's about serving you. It's about enriching you. And it's such a privilege to be able to work and serve alongside Dr. Pidgeon, because he has that very heart to serve Yah in your lives through his ministry. And for many of us, we have come, including myself, out of apostasy for 2 years, been in a wilderness and still are in a wilderness. Some of us are house churches, just doing ecclesia with our families and worshiping and being that Berean Jew and seeking the word for ourselves. But then to have the covering of someone like Dr. Stephen Pidgeon, well, wow, that's really special. He has integrity. I'm not saying that to puff him up. I'm saying that because he is accountable before Yah, and all he wants is to impart the word in this season into your lives. And that's why it's a privilege to work, to partner with someone of such reverence of the word, knowledge of the word, that can give us that covering and help us navigate these times. So from that end, it is a brilliant privilege. And I just thank Yah, I thank the Ruach that we live in empowerment where we can pursue and inherit and apply his words in those ways. You know, even the channel, which is a ministry again, Eating Wild Honey and Locusts, it's all about tribulation instruction, a blueprint for survival in these end days. I don't make any excuses. I don't make any compromise that when you tune into this program, it is always going to be speaking about the seals and the trumpets, the mysteries of the seals and the trumpets. Because we are in serious times, because we are in biblical times, because we are living in tribulation. And for those, there are two types of people in mankind that live in the last 7 years, that live in this juncture. Simply, it is the prepared, the elect, and the unprepared. And I have a heart for both, but I want to see those on the wrong crossroads coming and joining the right crossroads. And together we show how to stand, endure, and equip no matter what. That's our heart. And so I enjoy the fact that we can journey together with you. I enjoy the fact that Yah has brought us together. We are an ecclesia here, and it's just a beautiful honor to worship and to be able to provide this for you. You know, I've been speaking, as I've said, about the seals and the trumpets, and we were looking at what we call this jigsaw, the tribulation. Now, I've titled this, Behold, a Vision Horrible. That might not actually make sense to you right now, unless you're already reading the Apocrypha books, the apocalyptic books. It's a mouthful to say. That means the end time books. You know, these books, they have been kept out of the canon of the Bible. But wow, they are amazing. When you read them, you actually get to understand that they are relevant, that it is instructional for us. And it makes you wonder, why were they kept out? Why have they been kept out? Well, I know that's a part of the Jesuits and the Catholic Church taking that on and doing that. And you can see why, so that we don't know how to live and to go in these times. You know, and just as a side note, next week with Dr. Pidgeon on Fridays, we're starting a new program, Sepher Answers for This Time, 9:30 in the UK in the evening, 2:30 EST America time. And really what it's about is this. It is to reveal the hidden treasures, the instruction within all of the Sefer, which is the word, but also these biblical books that have a specific focus on the end times. We're going to learn the sacred names of God and how we base our convictions so that you know it's Yahuwah instead of God, it's Yahusha instead of Jesus, it's Ruach HaKodesh instead of the Holy Spirit. There's no condemnation from me, whichever you choose, because I know that there are so many people on the journey. Many of you here are not necessarily Torah pursuant, but you're in the company of people that have an understanding of a Hebrew understanding of the word, and you can see that that is the key to understanding the times that we live in. We didn't get this teaching about the feasts, and no one knows anything in Christendom as such to teach you on the trumpet. So if you want to know, because you know at the last trump, that's when he will come, when Yahushua will come, then we need to understand these feasts. We have to have an understanding of the word through a Hebrew perspective. And that's why you're in the company of other people that have been called out. So there's different spectrums and different walks that you're all in. And I acknowledge that here today. And so these books, they're going to be instrumental in helping us understand how to walk this out, in enriching our spirituality, enriching our prayer life, enriching an understanding of the words and applying it into the days that we are living in now, so that we can be an anchor to those who are less strong, that need to be anchored in, and they can see our strength and our reserve in this time. So my husband, he's introduced me into reading, into studying Second Ezra, which is sometimes called Fourth Ezra. So Edres, Second Edres, and it's also called Fourth Ezra. And wow, it's astounding, especially the chapters 15 and 16. Now, when it's new to you, you have to read it over several times. You can't get it the first time. When you're coming from the heritage that we have into Torah, it takes a lot to understand the pronunciations, the names, the meanings. But once you get there, what enrichment you get from this. And that's what we journey together in this program and the new one that's coming on Friday. You know, Enoch, it's not Enoch. Ezra is slightly mentioned very, very big in the prophecy of Daniel 9. It talks about the extra books and it's doing with Ezra. It's to do with Ezra. But when I first went and I read Enoch, I was dumbfounded. I was astounded. Enoch 1, verse 2, from the Sefer, it says, I heard all things and understood what I saw. That is Enoch saying he heard and he understood what he saw. Now get this, it says, it will not take place in this generation. It will not take place in the generation he saw, he was writing, he was witnessing. It was to succeed in a distant period on account of the elect. This is what I want to say to you. That distant period is us here and now. It is this generation. And so we're being written to spur up, to encourage, to direct the elect from all that time ago. That encourages me. And I want to know more about these books to navigate and help me in these times. You know, even with what Dr. Pidgeon is teaching us on to the British Isles and setting that foundation, it's the same principle. History has been hidden from us Just like the book of Enoch, it's gone and been destroyed time and time again, and it comes back. We need to know our heritage. We need to understand that. And the time is now so that we are living out fully in the ruach of our spirituality and understanding of the word. Solomon says there is a time for peace and there is a time for war. We are in a time of war. We are not in a new normal and a time of peace. That's just a pretense. We are in a time of war. You know, Bible schools and theologians, they like to water down what Solomon says and say, oh, this is a couplet. It's a season, one of the 14 seasons that he is talking about. No, it's not. You look at it from a Hebrew perspective and you look at the direct meaning, it's talking about armed conflict and an enemy. Likewise, you need to apply that in the spiritual. You need to recognize your enemy now. Don't sweep it under the carpet. Mr. Gates will be saved. Mr. Santa Claus will be saved. Don't sweep it. Recognize the evil that comes from these people's hands and what they are orchestrating. You need to understand it nationally. You need to understand it globally. You need to understand it social, politically, and how it is affecting us as a nation, let alone individually. That's the first and most important thing. Know your enemies. Know the arrows and the darts that come by day and by night. That is what it means to be a proper, equipped prayer warrior, intercessor, studying of the word. That is what it means. That is what is required. Now, I love this. Second Esdras, it just stands out, chapter 15, but I just want to take certain verses that stand out to me, that are here for you to equip you. Behold, speak into the ears of my people the word of prophecy, which I put in your mouth, Ezra, says Yahuwah. That's speaking to Ezra to speak into the ears of the people and give them the word of prophecy. That's no different. It's reminiscent to so many different prophetic books and in the Gospels, especially the prophetic books. Speak unto them. It reminds me of the Ezekiel 3 and Ezekiel 33 watchman call. Speak so that they hear. Speak into their ears the word that you hear me say, and cause them to be written in paper, for they are faithful and true. If they were not written in paper, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have this to go by. We wouldn't have this to navigate us in these times. That is what I thank Yah for. That is what I live in the presence and directs me when it's too much, when it just is too tough. Verse 3 says this, and I'm speaking prophetically into many people's lives here, including my own. Fear not the imaginations against you. Let not the incredulity, that's what it says in the Sefer, which means unbelief, of them trouble you that speak against you. In other versions, it says, fear not the imaginations that they have against you, for in their unbelief they shall die. If that is not a woe, then I don't know what is. Woe to you who makes evil good and evil bad. But what I'm saying here is this, Dr. Pidgeon, he said something so strategic on Saturday at the Shabbat meeting. He talked about being attacked and being persecuted and being spoken against. That slander in the public square is unto murder. And I have to agree with that. Why am I bringing that up? One, because he said that you can't defend yourself, but this is what you have to do. You have to stand strong, let Yah go before you, be your vindicator, be your retributor. Why am I bringing it into the scripture? Because that is the attack for the call of watchmen. That is the attack of the call of the elect and the called out ones that are standing and not going by the narrative of this world, not going by what is expected because it doesn't match up biblically. So I want to encourage you with that. In the Sefer it says, for all the unfaithful shall die in their unfaithfulness. Behold, says Yahuwah, that's God for those who don't know, I will bring plagues upon this world, the sword, famine, death, and destruction. You know what that is? Yahusha, Jesus, says the same in Matthew 24. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. I can't even go any further than that because, rumors of wars, that means lies. What we have been fake news media, fake media news of wars, fake news media of exaggeration of all that we've been through for the last 2 years and a bit. You know, this European situation that we're going through, this threat of war there, whilst that's going on and our attention is diverted, special laws and measures are coming into place because of this such rumors, because of outbreaks of supposed new strains, where we're going to have to be forced back into considering the snake bite to take that. Showing proof of that with the digital ID in the form of green passports. This is all coming about from the very first program. I said that in June, July, for the United Kingdom, these things would be phased in. And around the world now, we're beginning to see how these things are being phased in. But Yahusha says, but be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Now, that doesn't mean that we're just stuck in a vacuum of pain and sorrows. It's progressing. It's moving along the track to the end. That's important to understand. For nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in diverse places. We've seen earthquakes in diverse places. Since 2020, we've seen so many different types of pestilences and ones that haven't been reported on the mainstream news. Even in Australia, rats or mice, I can't remember which it was, locusts, the floods that have just up until recently been a huge issue. Mass floods, but they haven't been reported. And you know, in the USA, there's 16 major key food production plants, all within the last 4 months of 2022, that have caught on fire. What a coincidence that is. And what does that do? That halts production. Guys, do you not see what they are doing? Can you see it? This is the third seal peeling back. This is the third seal unfolding. But as I say all the time, Yah is in control, despite the evil men, despite their divisive schemes and the work they do to create havoc on all who dwell upon the earth. Yah is in control, so stand strong. You know, earthquake in various places. I remember as soon as 2020 hit, my goodness, there were earthquakes all the time. And what I've discovered recently by researching it is in 2021, within the first 4 months of that year, it beat the record of 2020. This is those diverse places and these earthquakes happening. We're used to now hearing about the La Palma volcanic eruption, but do you know that on the same day globally, 61 volcanic eruptions happened that same day? These are birth pains increasing in magnitude. These are birth pains increasing in magnitude and intensity, and it's heightening with natural disasters, increasing in every frequency. So again, as I bring this home, this is what I want to say. I want to bring to your attention again, and I will not make any excuse. This is the reason for tribulation instruction, how to pray, prepare and endure and be strong and be that one that can be part of the elect on that right pathway. These are 4 things that the Messiah says from Matthew 24 that again is in the seals of Revelation 6. Do not be deceived, because the first seal is about deception. It's not over. The fact that we've been hoodwinked to look there and it's happening over there, that's deception. We're still in a time of to conquer and to be conquered. And then we're seeing all around us the rumors of wars and potential wars taking place and scarcity for the third seal. And normally people say pestilence for that and famine, but it's scarcity. You can see we've just been talking about what is happening. If you cap it in China from the wheat and the fertilization until it's gone, there'll be a high price and there'll be scarcity and it will be unaffordable. See how these things fold and come about. The fourth seal speaks of pestilence, and 1, 2, 3, 4 all coinciding and coming and taking place at the same time, because there are 4 methods of death in the fourth seal. All of them overlap. 2nd Ezra says this: behold, a vision horrible, a terrible thing upon all those who dwell upon the face of the earth. very quickly, for wickedness has exceedingly polluted the whole earth, and the hurtful works are fulfilled. That's what I love how it says it in the Sefer. That's what we've been hearing, what we read in Jeremiah and Zechariah. Because of your abominations, now you suffer nationally and you suffer individually. Therefore, says God, Yahuwah, I will hold my tongue no more. Other translations say, I will hold my peace no more. That's the second seal. I take away my peace from the earth as touching their wickedness with profanity. Neither will I suffer them in those things in which they wickedly exercise themselves. Behold, the innocent and righteous blood cries unto me, and the souls of the just complain. Guys, that is the fifth seal. The souls under the temple crying at under the altar, how long? How long? Behold, a vision horrible, a terrible thing upon all those who dwell upon the face of the earth. But Yah is in control, and he says, seek me and live. Dr. Pidgeon, I caught you again.
Well, hi, Jessica. That was a very profound statement you just gave there. And there we go. I need to see you more. You're kind of off angle there.
Yeah, I'll work that out. You continue.
Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. Yeah. Now you're coming back in. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think your statement is a very, very good one. And I think, and in particular, there are things coming upon Britain. I mean, you can already see them, right? I mean, everybody who's in Britain now can certainly experience it. Whether you're talking about the high price for a liter of gasoline, or the cost of heating, the cost of electricity, all of these things are now present, right? And they're really robust.
Absolutely, yes.
And in addition to that, we see, food rationing has begun in Spain. They don't use the word rationing. They just tell you can only buy one. Two, limit per customer, right? That's rationing, right?
Of course.
And so as we see these kinds of things, these shortages, and you're talking about, and of course now, I mean, I get news every day about what's coming on with the coming Marburg virus, which apparently is going to be something initiated from the latency of the mRNA snake bite. Wow. So those who've had the snake bite have latency inside their system that is about to be exploited using a certain electronic field that has been deployed. That could cause, I shouldn't say is going to cause, but could cause this explosion of this new pandemic. And you are correct when you're talking about the vaccine passport.
Yeah.
A number of states in the United States are adopting this passport. Right now it's voluntary. And of course, I have a friend of mine who writes me all the time and says, well, I can still buy or sell. Therefore, the snake bite is not the mark.
Yeah.
Well, we're still going through this thing, right?
Absolutely, it'll get worse.
And for the faithful to try to walk through this, in Britain and UK, there's always a question because, of course, the UK is, it's too big of an island to walk, but it's a small island nonetheless, right?
Yeah.
It's much smaller than, shall we say, Australia, which constitutes a continent.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, New Zealand, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how the landmass compares between New Zealand and the UK. There are areas, arable areas and agricultural areas, but, all of this is Yah's deliverance. And, like Tony writes, get growing, guys. Yeah. And the thing is that there's lots of things you can do now. There's hydroponic stuff that you can grow. There's places where you can grow that are much easier than having to go out and have a lot of land. Because no one certainly has to farm, wheat to feed a nation. You do need to start doing things. This is going to be a very good year to plant and grow and can and jar, right?
Yes.
And also, I mean, this is what I talk to our group about. It's also a time to learn to eat less. Right?
Discipline, yes.
Yeah, discipline is a big factor about it. And of course, in the U.S., everybody eats like a pig. I mean, I got to tell you, Jessica, and I'll just tell you, I went to this restaurant in Bellevue, Washington, and I ordered. It was a European, a Mediterranean restaurant, and I said, well, "Okay, well, give me this, whatever it was. I don't remember now." But they brought out a platter that was, I mean, you can't even see how big it was. I mean, the platter was that wide, and they stacked food that high on it. And I'm looking at this, okay, all right. So I had dinner, and then I took it home, and our family ate on it for the next 2 days on this one plate, right? This is your serving size. Well, that's not a serving size. I don't know. Maybe you expect this to be a family meal. I mean, I didn't get it. It's not uncommon in the States to have restaurants think, well, you need a gigantic serving size in order to think our restaurant is, cool. Well, and really for the average person, working a fasting schedule into your life is a discipline that's well worth having.
Yes.
Because when you learn to fast, you learn to tell your body, look, no, right? And, the tongue doesn't get to drive the ship here. Right? Tongue
Very
is only
important.
a rudder. It's not the motor, right?
Yeah.
And so these kinds of things, I think, really help people in terms of what your expectation. Then you have an idea of what it's going to take to live and how much you can live on compared to how much you think you need to live on. But all of these things, and then, of course, be in contact with the fellowship of the brothers and the sisters. This is a very important part, very important time.
Yes.
To share resources of knowledge, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about spiritually, now, I mean, I've got to tell you, spiritually, from a spiritual point of view, both Britain, Canada, Australia, UK, and New Zealand, they all have kind of a similar difficulty because you have what I perceived in Britain was you have many people who have a very powerful knowledge base, right? And they make a commitment early on. I'm going to believe in this or I'm not going to believe in that. And then I'm going to follow this path or I'm going to follow that path. And that's the way it is. But you have lost touch really at almost every level. The average person in Britain has lost touch because there's been such a corruption of the foundation, the roots of everyone's faith. Let me give you an example. There was something that happened in Wales that in Wales, you had this Welsh revival in the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Well, this revival was an emotional revival. Okay.
Yes.
They thought it was a spiritual revival, but it was an emotional revival.
Yeah.
And the result of the emotional revival was to go back to a church that continued to teach Roman doctrine, anglicized Roman doctrine, but nonetheless, it was Roman doctrine anglicized. In other words, the hard substance of the truth of Scripture was not being presented because it hadn't yet been revealed. And so people thought, well, I'm in revival, which means what? Well, I go to church every week now, right? And I sing more hymns now than I did before. But all of this does not transfer into a conversion of your walk.
Yes.
From I'm still in the Masonic hall, I'm still aspiring to be a politician, a member of parliament, and I'm going down this path. I still watch the BBC. I still take advantage of the National Health Service, right? All of these things, and these things, the NHS and the BBC are huge corrupting entities. And at the top of the pyramid is the Masons.
Yes.
That's the top of the pyramid, right? So every Anglican priest, not everyone, but I'm almost all.
Yeah.
They're Masons. Every judge is a Mason, And so this is the situation. So what is the true church in Britain? It's the Masonic Hall. It's not Canterbury Cathedral or Yorkshire Cathedral or Westminster Abbey. This is not the true church. That's just a place to get married right? And go listen to some organ music. That's not the true church. The true church has the compass and the square and the G in the middle. That's the true church, right? And so because that is the true church, the Brit, the covenant man, Brit Ish, right? Brit for covenant, Ish man. The covenant man, the Brit Ish, this person has to restore himself to the covenant. He or she must be restored to the covenant. But Mashiach said when he broke the bread and drank the cup, right? When he took the cup, he said, Ze Brit Hadashah Badami. This is the renewed covenant in my blood.
Yeah.
Which covenant? Which covenant was being renewed? Well, it was the covenant of the 10 Devarim. It was the covenant of the 10 Devarim, the 10 commandments that were handwritten by Yah himself, handwritten given face to face to the people at Mount Horeb, the 10 covenants. Restore yourself to this covenant. Restore yourself to this covenant in his blood. So this taking of the bread, the taking of the cup, you restore yourself to that covenant. I am a child of the instruction of Yahweh. Not necessarily the instruction of Moshe, although Moshe is good for wisdom and understanding, but the instruction, the handwritten instruction of Yahweh. Deuteronomy 5:22 says he added nothing further. He wrote these commands and he added nothing further. Could he have written more? He could have. But he gave these instructions and said, do these, guard them, keep them, do these things. Become my child and I will be your Elohim. Then what does he say in Jeremiah 7:21? He says, you want to go out and have a sacrifice, kill a bull and have a sacrifice? Go out there, kill a full bull, eat the flesh, have a barbecue. But I never told you to do these things when I brought you out of Egypt. Instead, I said, obey my voice. And I will be your Elohim and you will be my people.
Yes, yes.
Now, so these are kind of the kind of problems that we kind of have in Britain. So the understanding, because you've grown up with it for generations now.
Yeah.
The understanding is, well, we go to the National Health Service. The understanding is, well, BBC tells us what's going on. Remember that BBC concealed Jimmy Savile for all 80 years of his life, right? And he was the celebrity. He was the ideal. He was the pop ideal. And of course, Jimmy Savile, right? He demonstrated the kind of corruption that was going on, in high places.
Yes, absolutely.
In high places, right? And so the thing is, what about the average British? What about the average person? The average person who lives an average life in Britain. Well, that average life in Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, has been given this formula out of the Hokmah Shalomah, the second chapter of the Wisdom of Solomon, saying, well, you're going to die anyway, so you might as well just, go for the gusto, right? The old Budweiser commercial. Go, get all the gusto you can get. Go for the gusto, right? Or carpe diem, you got to live life today. So get out there and oppress and do your thing and live a life of, eating, drinking, and being merry, because there's no standard. There's no discipline. There's no saying no. Yet, Britain, for a long period of time, was able to be a disciplined society in terms of what it attempted to impose. At one time, London had the largest single number of brothels of any city on earth.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can imagine.
It was the prostitution capital of the whole world, right? And finally, you had British society trying to walk out of that and say, no, we're going to adhere to this standard, this Mosaic standard, or not Mosaic standard, the Paradise Torah, right? When Mashiach says, if you recall in the Gospels, it says, well, Moses gave us a certificate of divorce. And Mashiach says to them, Moshe suffered to give you a certificate of divorce because of the hardness of your hearts.
Yes, yes.
But I tell you, in the beginning, it was not so. Now, for Mashiach to say in the beginning it was not so, he's telling you that there was an instruction, there was a Torah that preceded Moshe that Moshe contradicted. Moshe eroded. Moshe changed. In the beginning, it was not so, but Moshe made it different. And of course, Moshe operated in the hand of Yah, of course. But a lot of the instruction that Moshe was given was because Aaron made a golden calf.
Right.
People did not leave Egypt.
Yes.
So this was a lot of the instruction that was being given. But Yah, in the meantime, met with them face to face at Mount Horeb and spoke the 10 Commandments, Exodus chapter 20. And then he revisited and wrote it down on sapphire stones in Deuteronomy 5, giving the 10 Commandments in writing and saying, these are my commandments. And he added nothing further. Well, those commandments, of course, make a huge, huge difference in terms of who we are. Now, as a people, when we talk about what happened in Britain, I want to kind of get back and focus, pick up where we left off last week. Because we left off last week with Prince Madoc, right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, Madoc had discovered North America. He came back and reported this to the Welsh king, who at this time was King Arthur II. And Arthur II was, of course, still resistant to Rome, but Rome had already made an incursion. Hadrian had already succeeded in Rome, or in Britain, had gone up and created the wall. But they could not succeed spiritually. They could not succeed religiously because the faith had foundations built in the western part of the British Isles, primarily out of Wales, Glamorgan, and so forth,
Mm.
where you had this push that was coming out of the strong faith. Well, something very interesting happened in, I think it was 590 AD, which was a comet came over the British Isles, comet or a meteor or something like this.
Mm.
Did you see the meteor that blew up in Russia? It was 2 years ago. Might have been
Yeah.
2016.
I do remember that. Yeah.
It came
Something
down.
like that.
It was very low trajectory, and then it detonated. Went off like a nuclear bomb.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, this one was
Lots of
like an
questions.
even bigger meteor than that. And
Mm.
this, Alan Wilson says it was a comet, but it could have been a meteor. But anyway, something came in over the coast of Norway. And of course, when it comes over the trajectory of the Earth, right, it comes down at an angle like this. It doesn't come in like this. It comes down like this, right?
Mm.
And so it came over from the top of Norway and then came over around Yorkshire and went over the British Isles and over Ireland and scorched the place, scorched it, such that they could not plant in the British Isles for 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. So Arthur sees this and says, well, we got to get out of here. So he gets 70 ships together and they sail to North America. And they go right in the St. Lawrence waterway. They go all the way into Lake Ontario, which is, that's where Toronto is, on the north side of Ontario. And from there, they offload and they begin to build a culture in Ohio, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky. Now, there's a historian in Northern Kentucky who's gone through, literally hundreds of artifacts demonstrating the use of the Colburn alphabet, which initially identified as Paleo-Hebrew, but that was a premature identification because the Colburn, the Hittite alphabet, the Etruscan alphabet are all derived from the Paleo-Hebrew.
Yeah.
Which would eventually become the Greek Cyrillic. But in the meantime, you have these alphabets. Well, so here's this Colburn identifiers in North America. So the story goes that Arthur was in fact killed in North America. He was killed by other natives that lived in the land, died from arrows. And so they packed up his body and they brought him back to Wales, and they brought him back to Wales for a burial. And literally 1,000 people attended his burial in 592 AD. Well, 592 AD was a very significant turning point because when Arthur was buried in Wales in 592, by the way, Alan Wilson did find his grave.
Really?
Yeah, because they found the church that they believed it was there historically.
Yeah.
And the Welsh were going to put, the Welsh government was going to put windmills over this church, just tear it down and put windmills. Well, Alan Wilson bought it, found the church, then he went in there and then he explored it with these sonic things that you can explore around. And he found a grave which would be to the right. So if the priest was sitting at the altar in front of the Holy of Holies, he's standing here. So the place of honor would be to bury at his right. So he went and looked on the right, and yes, he found a grave, and they dug it up. And when they opened up the tomb, they found a 6-foot man with a cross on his chest that said Arthur. Now, Alan Wilson still has the cross is secreted somewhere. It's held in private, but they still have the cross. But the thing is with this, so with the death of Arthur in 592, you have something else happening on the other side of the country, Canterbury, where Augustine comes in Canterbury. And Augustine comes in Canterbury and begins to push the Roman way. Now, as much as we talk about this book we're talking about here, the book that is now becoming a bestseller, I guess, over there.
This one, The Lost Disciples.
Yeah, of the Lost Disciples. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a book that we're going to be publishing on Sefer,
Wow.
history of the church.
Fantastic.
Which is, in my opinion, is a better book than The Lost Drama.
Well, you've done research to add to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this book is going, and I'm in the process of formatting. It's very difficult to format, but it's a very well structured book, and it talks about what went on with Augustine coming in. Now, remember, a lot of this history is, you're dealing with Gildas and some other historians, but there's almost nothing earlier than Gildas in the 7th century. However, we do have some church records concerning Augustine, and Augustine came in, and he was asserting the Roman way, which meant what? Mary. The ascendancy of Mary, the supremacy of Mary, and then the saints. And so here in comes Rome, and Rome says, you have to put up a statue of Mary, and you have to do this, and of course, Sunday service. And the Welsh churches were like, we're not doing that. First of all, there's nothing higher in Scripture than a bishop, and there's this business of having a pope and cardinals is a bunch of baloney. There's no pope, there's no cardinals. You got a bishop of Rome, we got a bishop of London, we have a bishop of Cardiff. We're not going to have this, super bishop.
Yeah.
Well, the Romans were like, oh, yes, you are. And so Augustine comes in and eventually secures enough political power to excommunicate all the bishops in the West. And he excommunicates them, and eventually many of them are executed. They're executed by Augustine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Augustine becomes anathema to the Grail bloodline. So the Grail bloodline now is still trying to rule, and the Grail bloodline begins to move north. It goes out of Wales and it moves up north, and it moves up not into Lancashire, but it moves up into, about where you are. You're talking about up in Manchester, and up near Liverpool. And ultimately, in the 11th century, the Grail line is going to move into Scotland. And Scotland is going to be the Grail line until we see James I, right, coming from Mary, Queen of Scots. And so this is the Grail line, right? And so the Grail line comes in, and when the Grail line gets there, now you have this erosion with, James I is one thing, right? James I, who's going to come in and say, well, we're going to move forward with Protestantism because he was just 2 generations from Henry VIII. And Henry VIII had, and as much opprobrium is given to Henry VIII because of his willingness to, because his need to divorce his wife, even though, the irony is, you've given me no son. Mm. And one who takes the throne is Elizabeth I, right? It's the irony of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And but nonetheless, he had to break sovereignty with Rome. So this whole time you see this battle going on. The church founding here in the West, and Rome asserting itself in the East, and this is going on. So Rome has achieved political power, then achieves religious power. Then, no, we're not going to put up with that. And there's a pushback from the original faith in the UK. And then Rome asserts itself again. And then there's a pushback again. And then eventually the Grail arrives in Scotland, and you get this idea of Scottish separacy with Robert the Bruce, right? Robert the Bruce. And Robert the Bruce is going to cause Scottish sovereignty for some brief period of time until the Grail line is overthrown. Well, with Mary, Queen of Scots, and the rise of her son James VI in Scotland, who becomes James I of England, you see that what takes place now, this wall, Hadrian's Wall, now erodes, right? Because James I has crossed the threshold. Well, James I is not going to upset in any respect the reign of Henry VIII, who took them away from the jurisdiction of Rome, and Elizabeth I, who was excommunicated by Rome, and who called Augustine, she called him Austin, and referred to him as the most wicked thing that ever happened to Britain. So you see that Elizabeth I was now making her attempt to assert once again the true faith, although the true faith was never correctly identified. Why? Because when Tyndale started to work into his English scripture, Tyndale knew, and he used the name Yahweh in his translation in one place, as did John Calvin in the 1560 Geneva,
really?
as did Wycliffe, as did Luther, and they all knew what the true name was, but they would only use it sparsely, once here, once there. But Tyndale knew that Henry VIII was saying, "No vicarius filio Dei." The Pope is not in place of the Son of Yah on earth, because if to do that, it gives the sovereignty of our nation to Rome. And if Henry VIII had allowed Roman sovereignty to continue over England, England would be part of Spain right now. It would be completely controlled by Spain. You would be speaking Spanish, not English. Right? So Henry VIII said, we're not going to allow the sovereignty of Rome to continue. So Tyndale wanted to associate the divine right of kings. He wanted to associate the divine right of kings with vicarius filio Dei. So the Pope isn't vicarius filio Dei. The King of England is vicarius filio Dei. And this is why they elected to use the word Lord in the English scriptures. They use the word Lord to equate the king with Yah, one and the same.
Wow. Whoa.
Okay.
Goodness. Yeah.
So this is what was going on. Now, Tyndale, as soon as he went into Europe, he published this in Britain. As soon as he went into Europe, oh, you're the guy that published the English scriptures, kill him. As soon as he got European jurisdiction, as soon as he got in the old EU, before there was ever EU, right? Got into the EU after the Brexit, and they immediately put him to death. Okay. So here, now when we get to James, James isn't going to upturn the boat that has been so carefully established by Elizabeth I, but he's got a problem because the Calvinist 1560 Geneva is ruling the day. He's like, hey, what's this Calvinist Bible? How come this guy's getting all the action? Let's create our own. And so they create the King James Version, authorized version, which was run by Francis Bacon and his interpreters, some 53 interpreters from Cambridge, Oxford, and other places, including native Hebrew speakers. And they put together the KJV, which included the Apocrypha, the whole Shalom, the Wisdom of Solomon, 4th Ezra, 3 Ezra. All of this is in the KJV, right?
Yeah.
Well, they still could not compete. The Geneva Bible continued to be the dominant force. And you see this rise of what's called Scottish Presbyterianism. Scottish Presbyterianism said, we're going to run our church via the formula given in Isaiah 43, which is we have an executive and a legislative and a judicial branch. And the church is going to be run by presbyters or elders because there's one king, Mashiach. See, so the Scottish presbyters came out and said, you're king, you're political king, but there's one king. There's one king. There's one king on the throne of David, which is Mashiach. Now, this was the push of the Scottish presbyters. Well, the Anglicans are pushing back and saying, no, divine right of kings, divine right of kings. But they can only say that for so long because, Charles I tried to take the country back into Catholicism. Oliver Cromwell had him beheaded for treason because he was trying to give British sovereignty back to Rome, right? John Plantagenet, who signed the Magna Carta, did the same thing. He gave the sovereignty of Britain right back to Rome, right? And he was a usurper to the crown too. He should have never been king. He was a usurper to the crown, but he gave the sovereignty right back to Rome. And so once again, it's this push between Anglicanism and Romanism, right? And in the meantime, the Presbyterians actually figure out that Mashiach is the king, not the Holy Grail out of Wales, and not the claim to the throne that came in from the Germans with William and Mary of Orange.
Yeah.
No, the true king is Mashiach. Now, this is what we see now. The same play is going on. The only difference is now we have a greater handle on the truth inside the British Isles, and we have a responsibility to build Jerusalem.
Amen. Yes. Yes.
We have a responsibility to build Jerusalem as living stones of the temple. Right? Revelation 11. Take ye a reed like unto a rod, and measure the stones of the temple and them that worship therein. This is where we are. This is who we are. The living stones of the temple that are inside the temple. This is who we are. And this is where we are.
Yes.
So New Jerusalem must be built, and it must be built. There's two ways to build New Jerusalem. One is everything you know about the NHS must be questioned. Everything you know about the BBC and every word that they say to you must be questioned. And you must come out of the Masonic Hall. You must. You cannot be inside the Masonic Hall. No, of course we understand why the Masonic Hall would be revered in Britain. Look at all the masonry that's gone up.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the history of the masonry. Okay, fantastic. But inside the Masonic Hall, you've had infiltration by satanic forces called the Illuminati beginning in 1776. In 1776, Wieshaupt, out of Vienna, is the one who created the Illuminati on behalf of certain banking interests, including what was left of the Knights Templar in Scotland and the Knights Templar in Switzerland. And the Knights Templar in Scotland, with the influence of the Illuminati, invaded and infiltrated the Masonic temples and created Scottish Rite Masonry. And Scottish Rite Masonry asserts the god of the Knights Templar, which is the Baphomet.
Wow, really? The Baphomet. Oh my goodness.
The Baphomet.
Yeah. Gosh, and everyone knows about the Baphomet, but to have that connection, that's quite astounding.
Well, they're never going to tell you that because anyone who's 31st, 32nd, or 33rd level Mason is sworn to secrecy, that if they open their mouth at all, they'll be dismembered.
Yes.
And so, again, this is a very difficult. I didn't talk about the Knights Templar, but the Knights Templar, when they were destroyed by Henry I in France, who stole their property because they were the single largest property owner in Europe, and then he was murdered by what was left of the Knights Templar, as was the Pope. Both of them were murdered within 4 months of their theft of all of the land of the Knights Templar. But the Templars broke into two groups. One went to Scotland and one went to Switzerland. The ones that went to Switzerland took the Templar banking practice with them.
So interesting.
Okay. And the Templars took the Baphomet with them into Scotland. And so as a result, again, the faith practiced in Scotland was compromised.
Yeah.
And it was compromised by people who went into the Masonic order that had been infiltrated by satanic or demonic forces, the Baphomet, right? Another name for Baphomet is Pan. But it was a fallen watcher, a fallen Nephilim that became a demigod, Pan, half man, half goat, half male, half female, and whose private parts are the serpent. It's the caduceus, it's the serpent. So guess what? Here comes the Baphomet, and what are you required to worship? The serpent, the caduceus, the Asclepius. What is the symbol of the NHS but a serpent wrapped around a pole? The Asclepius. Everybody come outside your house and let's applaud.
Yeah.
Let's applaud the serpent.
Absolutely.
So this is for British. I mean, there's two things you have to do. One is you have to walk in the way that Mashiach gave you, and two, you have to stop walking in Babylon.
Yes, absolutely. You got it in one. Absolutely.
So that's my story, Jessica. Sticking
to
it.
Thank you. We've got 5 minutes left. That was good timing. What I do want to say to you is this. I have, for the last 7 days, been inundated with people saying, one, they never knew the history that you've opened up, as well as Americans, people in the UK, America, wider than the Sefer group, are so fascinated and they want more because it's teaching them to set a precedent for their nation and to understand this one. And they wouldn't otherwise know. And I said to you in a text I mentioned to you, since your program, everyone's been trying to get this book. And in the UK, it went from £13 to 18 up to £32, and that's old research because the author's passed away now. So can you imagine when you get your book, what it will be for the people just to have updated research? But it's for people living in this country. They're excited about this, but they're saying to tell you, thank you. They really appreciate what you are doing, how you're investing in the British Isles, Scotland, Ireland, the United Kingdom, taking it beyond their level of understanding, but they're getting there. And for investing in this nation to these people, so many people, they say things like, I go to sleep listening to what you say. I'm not giving adulation to you, Stephen. That would do nothing. All adulation and praise goes to Yah. And we're here for kingdom business and kingdom impact. But at the same time, half of the people who are a community, I hate saying they're an audience, they are a fellowship, they are an ecclesia that joins here. They come because they need that covering. They need that mentoring. They're not getting it from outside. They're not getting it from the old fellowships. They come here on a Tuesday, on a Thursday. They're into the websites, into your research. And some of this is too hard for them. They want to know the pronunciations of the names, the pronunciations in all of this book, the understanding, the sacred names, how you base that, those convictions, the extra books, that we call it the extra biblical books. They want to understand how they apply to our lives. And so they're so excited. We've got different community groups going on, and it's just thank you, Stephen. And I want to thank you for investing in this country and this ministry.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have to tell you, Jessica, I mean, Yah has placed Britain on my heart. Why? I don't know. I was never expecting this, but this is what he has done. And I was surprised to get to the British Isles and to see such a beautiful history, a tremendous history, a history I had no idea of. And when I discovered the history, to discover it was such intense beauty, and to know that the faith was, the foundation of faith was built there. And and listen, there may have been a time where there was not a single believer alive, living. because faith had been so wiped out by Rome.
Yeah.
But heaven and earth may pass away, but my word will never pass away.
Yes.
His word did not pass away. And as a result, the garden is growing anew.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Wow. You know, I just can't wait for you to continue setting this foundation. And I'm speaking on behalf of so many here, you know, how in light of what we are going through now, because so much of us just lost it for this nation, and just like you sort of, okay, how do we rekindle this? How do we walk this? And we're still asking those questions, but we didn't know half of this as well. And you have to do your own research and you know, form that conviction and that idea, but we wouldn't have been exposed to this. We wouldn't have understood it. So thank you for that. I want to give you this last minute to say what's on your heart before we say goodbye until we reconnect next time. And then we'll be joining again on Fridays with a new program as well.
Well, here, and that's going to be great, Jessica. Here's what's on my heart. British, the covenant man. The British people are children of the covenant, born this way, born into this covenant. And they are the children of Ephraim and have the birthright. And as a consequence, there is a true blessing on the British people. And this idea of British guilt and all this other stuff, forget that stuff. Stop being guilty about whatever the colonization was and whatever the practice of the British East Indies was. Forget about that. You need to concentrate on being forgiven, being repentant, and moving forward in the kingdom, because his kingdom is coming alive. We build Jerusalem together.
Amen. What a great place to stop. Thank you, Dr. Pidgeon. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. Yah bless you all. Until next time.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
Two people laughed. Two people cried. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Ever seen a blind man cross the road, trying to make the other side, baby? Ever seen a young girl growing old, trying to make herself a bride? So what becomes of you, my love?
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Pray that he's still out there. Somewhere.